In today's episode of Not Nice Clever, we are talking about how to make decisions like a CEO, like the CEO that you are. You have to step into that role. And I've learned a ton about making decisions as a CEO by watching some of my favorite leaders and entrepreneurs in this space. And my friend group, I've really been able to assemble a friend group that are a bunch of badass CEOs that I get to watch and learn from all the time. And so Kat and I thought it would be cool if we brought you some of the tips that we have learned along our journey. And we are keeping it to just three. We promised ourselves to keep this short and sweet for you today.
Yes. And as you just said, of like assemble a team of CEOs or a friend group of CEOs, in my mind, I was like, Avengers Assemble, but we won't go
Of
down the
course you were.
Marvel rabbit hole. Of course I was. Okay. Tip number one, probably the most important one, trust your instincts and your team. Often in that order. What we found in having conversations with our friends who are also building businesses and by building our own brands and businesses is that your first instinct, more often than not, is the right one. And by learning to trust yourself and trust your gut instinct, you are able to make quicker, more nimble decisions and not have those moments, right? When you would take a test when you were younger and you would go with the first answer and then you would go back at the end because you had extra time before the test time was up and you would scribble out the initial answers and then scribble in a new one. And then those were the questions that you got wrong on the final test, right? So, like, we don't want that situation. So, super important to trust your instincts and also your team because, Candace, let's share with the people. Are we successful all by ourselves? Are we doing all the things all the
Definitely
time?
not. We definitely do not do all that it requires to run our podcast even by ourselves.
Mm-hmm.
We have a full team of people who help to support us and position us in the way that we want to be seen. And so
Mm-hmm.
if you are a solopreneur right now and you're listening to this and you're like, oh, that's the dream. I wish I had a team of people to support me. Kat and I were also in those spaces as well, where we were solo entrepreneurs doing everything, but we understood that to grow and scale and have the business and like the time freedom that we wanted, we did have to add people to our team. Now, there's a lot of lessons that we learned from adding people to our team and things that we maybe wish we would have done differently.
Mm-hmm.
But in hiring people to the team, we also were able to recognize what gaps we still had and ask better questions on that next hire, right? So we learned a lot in the process of hiring. So don't be afraid to hire people and also don't be afraid to let people go because
Yeah.
you have your own vision for what you want to be true in your business. And you also likely have an idea of who needs to be on your team to support that vision and help you move forward. And so
Yeah.
if you assemble the right team, you absolutely should trust them and trust that they're able to execute on whatever it is that you're trying to execute on.
Yep. Trust is huge in being able to scale. It's probably one of those metrics that's not easily measurable, but that does make a difference in building a sustainable foundation upon which you can build. And this leads us next to our second tip that we want to share with you because we see a lot of people really struggle to know what is the right decision, what's the best decision, what's the correct decision. And for us, what we have learned in making decisions like a CEO does is that CEOs always have very clear, unequivocal, unapologetic priorities. They know what their vision is, they know what to focus on, because when you know what to focus on, it becomes a lot easier to know what to say yes to and to know what to say no to, and to not feel bad about it either, right? I feel like that kind of really clouds and like drags down making quick decisions.
Yeah, if you want to make quick decisions, you definitely have to remember where it is that you're trying to go because we've all gotten lost in shiny object syndrome at some point, and that is
Yes.
still something that happens, right? Ooh, so and so's doing this, I should do that. Even
Mm-hmm.
though it might not be aligned with where you're going or aligned with the plans that you have. And so I would say definitely have those clear priorities, write them down, put them in front of you, And in
Mhm.
addition to that, when you do feel like that shiny object syndrome is coming on, I would just make a list of things that you're also kind of interested in. So that way it exists somewhere and you can
Mhm.
go back to it, but you're not acting on it in that moment. That's also a great thing to do when it comes to your team, because I know sometimes my team comes to me with ideas and I want them to know that I value their ideas and I'm glad that they're thinking about ways to do things differently. But
Mhm.
sometimes it's not aligned with exactly where I'm going at the moment. And so what I do is like I'll keep a running spreadsheet of things that they've mentioned to me so they know that I hear them, I see them, and they also know that when it's time, I can go back to that, be like, you know what? Remember you brought this up last month? Actually, now is the time, or you brought this up last year even. Like, I think
Mhm.
now is the time. This was a good idea and I want to act on it and not act like it was my idea. Acknowledge
Yeah.
them.
Yeah.
So that has really helped me to build communication with my team as well. So I can still make the decision that makes sense right now in this moment, but I can hold on to that idea for a future decision.
It's so funny that you do that because this is the first time, guys, I think that Candace, you've specifically shared that you do that with your team. Maybe we've talked about it in passing or in other conversations because we've had thousands of conversations at this point. But I do the same thing. I call it our kind of idea parking lot. Like,
Hmm.
great idea, not great for right now. Who knows? It could be great in the future. Like, that's the other thing, too. Like, just because an idea is not great in the moment doesn't mean that it can't just like go into a vault or go
Or
into
it's
the
not even
parking
that's
lot.
not a great idea. It's like literally could be a great idea, but right now with this, and this that's happening, it just
Right.
doesn't,
Just doesn't
it's
make
not
sense.
possible, doesn't make sense. Yeah.
Yeah. So, parking lot, vault, scratch pad, spreadsheet, whatever it is, have a place so that you can still acknowledge and validate the creativity and support your team's giving you, but not derail the entire company because then that
Ah,
doesn't do anybody any good.
yeah, that's so important.
Hmm.
Okay, lastly, it's limit your options. So I learned this from, of course, I'm not going to remember his name, but I heard this on a podcast not that long ago and I really liked it. What he said was when his members would run into a problem, he'd have them send him a specific email in a specific format, say, like, this is the problem. Here's the research I did. With that being said, these are the 3 ways I'd like to solve it, or I'd propose that we solve it. And from these 3 ways, I like option 2 the best. So it's very specific formula. It's like
Hmm.
problem, research, suggestions, which one the team member likes the best. Then from there,
Yes.
the CEO then says, "Okay, great. Like I trust you. Go with your instinct. Let's do number 2." And kind of takes the decision making away, but he's still being a swift decision maker
Hmm.
because ultimately he's the one that's giving the green light.
Yeah.
But also he didn't have to do a lot of the back end work and he's demonstrated to his team that he trusts them to pick the right path. And every once in a while, he says he'll pick something that is not their number one pick or,
Hmm.
offer an alternative. But since there are limited options, it really helps to make that decision quickly.
So I obviously took a page out of your book, Candace, and I Googled it while you were talking about it. And this is the 131 method that
The
we heard
131
about
method.
from Dan Martell, which, by the way, we did a mini on this. So we'll put a link to that episode in the show notes because it's a great refresher. And if you're listening to this and you're not yet a CEO, you can start by embodying the idea of one by thinking and acting like one and by looking at any problem that arises. Because what I found is that people will often get lost in the drama of a problem and
Mm-hmm.
they'll like want to pitch about it. They'll want to gossip about it. They'll want to just like, "Duh, duh, 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 duh," and it's like, that's wasting time.
Yep,
Identify the problem, 3 solutions. What, as you being an expert in identifying the problem in the first place, would you recommend? And just move forward. Just
that's it.
remove the drama.
That is so key to remove the drama. And it's something that I've learned to do over the last few years. It's like this thing that's happening is not a reflection of me as a human being. It's just a thing that's happening.
Yes.
And the best way that I can move this along is by just taking the next right step in this moment. And so
Mhm.
if you are thinking like a CEO, CEOs are always just thinking about, yes, the big picture and where they're going and what's the next right step to get them to that big picture while removing the emotions of it. If you could do that, you're just going to be a happier CEO as well.
Yes,
Happier
we
and
love
more
that.
successful. That's real winning.
That is the win, the Venn diagram of those two things.
There you go.
So we hope you've enjoyed this episode, this mini episode of Not Nice Clever. Before we wrap, we want to give a shout out to our dear friend, Tim Reagan, who left an amazing review for us. He titled it A Must Listen. He says, I love a good podcast. This one is flipping fantastic. You can also swear, Tim. You know the rules here at Not Nice Clever. These women share some amazing entrepreneurial nuggets, all while having great energy. I feel like I'm in conversation with them as I listen. Great stuff, and I highly recommend. Kudos to us. Great show. Thank you, Tim. We
Thank
appreciate
you
your
so
support.
much.
You've been an early supporter, probably Clever Crew member number 2, if not number 1. So thank you, Tim, and we'll catch you on the next episode.
Thanks for joining us on Not Nice, Clever.
Remember to follow Not Nice Clever wherever you listen to audio.
And if you haven't already, drop that 5-star review.
Share your takeaways. Tell us your story. We love to hear it.
Signing off, your not so nice, but oh so clever besties that mean business.
See you soon.